As camp professionals, we are always looking to improve, be intentional with all our training and programming, and to see the big picture. There are moments that happen at camp every now and then, however, that teach us that we missed something. We need to be open to these everyday little experiences so that we can continue to take the best care of our people. Join us for the stories and the lessons learned.
Imagine camp registration software that actually gives you more time to do what you love. With UltraCamp, you can effortlessly track attendance, manage staff, streamline registration, and more. Explore now at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. After 10 years of podcasting, is there anything left to say? Oh, you bet there is, because just like people grow and change, so does our industry. Each and every year, there are new challenges, new ways of handling situations, new advice from those doing the work, and new ideas to share. Our commitment to intentional leadership training has only grown stronger. And we welcome you to the season 11 of Camp Code as we once again do all that we can to help you develop your best ever leadership training. And before we dive in, I really would love to hear from our co-hosts. So Beth, can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a camp consultant and a trainer who loves the potential and all the opportunities to be intentional at leadership training.
Thanks, Beth. And Gabrielle.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Woro. Camp Woro is an all-girls camp, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Ruby Compton. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors. I run a training and support company in Western North Carolina in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains to support camps and outdoor programs. And today's topic is the idea of those little unintentional teachable moments, maybe a moment that happened at camp that you went, aha, and realized there was something that you forgot to teach or need to teach to help folks be successful. So Beth, I was hoping we could start with you. Do you have any memories or stories like that?
Oh boy, a list. They're the sort of aha moments you have at camp when you go, oh, right. Should have talked about that more. So my first story comes from our outdoor ed center that we ran in the off season. So we had a group of sixth graders, and I did that for my American friends. Canadians would say grade sixers, come and stay with us for 4 days. And keep in mind, we had visited the school months before for a presentation with the teachers and presentation with the parents and the kids one evening. We had sent out letters to the classes and the individual families complete with everything we thought they needed to know prior to attending, packing lists, how meals worked, what to expect when they arrived, a bit about all the activities, and of course, how our community worked. And when everybody arrived, we held a community meeting with all of the students and teachers and the parent volunteers and went over all the safety and emergency procedures, how the camp day would run, and of course, how we would all treat one another following the 4S test. So is it safe? Is it good stewardship of our resources? Does it serve the community? Does it build self-esteem? Now, remember, we had also gone over these in the school meetings that we attended and in our written communications already. This was yet another time to talk about our culture. And as school board regulations go in Ontario, our staff was not permitted to sleep in the cabins with the students. So they had parent volunteers stay in each cabin at night. And the second day into the program, during our post-campfire meeting with our own staff, a few of them shared that they had started to hear little trickles of happenings from the students themselves about a few pranks that were being played on the cabins. So we decided we would need to address this with the teachers in the morning. So the next morning, before the meeting, I was awakened very early by my outdoor center director, who said a camp director's favorite words, we have a problem. And at dawn that morning, one of the boys' cabins had awakened a cabin of girls by pelting what they first thought were water balloons at the cabin porch and on the windows. And the girls were awakened when one of the balloons broke as it hit the window screen, and the contents of the balloon landed on the camper. And she woke up screaming because not only were the contents wet, they were not water. It was urine. It was urine.
Nope.
No.
The boys' cabin had filled the balloons with their pee and then went on their little raid. And that is not the worst part of the story. When we investigated it and sat down the boys to talk with them, it turned out this prank and all the other pranks that they then told us about that we had no idea had happened were all the brainchild of the parent volunteer in this boys' cabin. And this father had gone to summer camp as a child, likely in the 80s, and remembered all the fun he had playing practical jokes on the other cabins. It was his favorite part of summer camp, and he wanted his son and his son's friends to experience that too. And what we realized we had missed with all the front loading we had done with teachers and parents was that we didn't actually have a meeting with just that group when they arrived. We didn't sit all the adults down, the teachers and the parents, and say, look, it's not the 80s anymore. The movie Meatballs is not what we're going for here. And here's why. Yep. We told them what the 4 S's were. We explained that we treat each other with kindness and respect, but we didn't explain why this was so important in the work that we do. So the big lesson for me was we know what the 4 S's meant in all situations, but those coming to us for just a really short period of time don't always fully comprehend, especially when we don't spell it out explicitly and give them the reasons behind the decisions that we make. So if you're running anything with parent volunteers or adult volunteers who haven't been through your entire leadership training program, but come out to help out or experience something with their own children, which are both really important and wonderful reasons, you need to be sure that you're all on the same page, or you will hear, we have a problem. And it will not be fun to sit down with those parents and have that conversation afterwards. Trust me.
That is the very reason on every night hike, not because of urine balloons, but every night hike that I lead, I give the spiel. We are not out here to scare each other. It is not an acceptable thing to do. And yeah, I'm saying it to the kids, but 9 times out of 10, it was the adults that would do it. And I was like, this is why we don't. They spend their whole time being scared. So even on my adult hikes that I lead now, I still tell them that because we're in the dark. People think it's funny. And it's like, oh, so not funny. So not funny.
Right.
Oh.
Exactly.
As an adult that can get scared very easily, I appreciate that you'd make those comments.
Here
I don't
for you.
like
I'm
it.
here
It's
for you.
ridiculous.
Oh, it's awful. I hate it. I hate it so much. Gabz, do you want to go next? Do you want me to go next?
Oh no, I got it. I just came back from the Quebec Camp Association conference, great conference, and one of their keynotes, who's a child psychiatrist, was talking about the patterns in behavioral issues with kids, our little kiddos, and young adults, and what's the biology behind that, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the questions she asked was like, what's the age group are you finding that you're having the most difficulty with? And a lot of people yelled out like 5-year-olds. And so there's definitely a lot of day camps that we have. So there's some 5-year-olds. So she said, oh, that's very interesting. And it also makes sense. She said, like right now where we're finding one of the biggest difficulties is 8-year-olds. They're the ones that are really like socialization. There's some issues. But it made me think of this summer. So we have our intro to camp program, our little junior campers. They're strong and independent. We don't call them cute, but they are really cute. Like, my gosh. But anyways, strong and independent. And they've always been kind of difficult. They're there for 5 days. It's 6 and 7-year-olds, but they're like a whole other like level of difficulty, and they're already kind of tough. And we hadn't adjusted to that. And I heard this one kid say to their staff member, she just paused and looked at her and she said, "You try too hard." It was so brutal.
Oh.
This poor 17-year-old just looked at her, took a moment, walked behind a building. I went to go find her. She was crying behind the building. And she was like, I don't, they're so mean and I don't know what to do. And I was like, yeah, that was brutal. I was like, I'll put that in my pocket if I want to like ruin somebody's week, I think. But they're so tough. And I already knew that these kiddos were kind of difficult, and we're all having some difficulty with, all the age groups. But we have adjusted accordingly in the support with some of the campers that don't only need maybe behavioral issue like support, but also the everyday needs that 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds might bring to the table. But it also showed me what some of our staff members are going through, and it was quite telling that a whole room of adults. I've never heard somebody say 5-year-olds are what's the most difficult for us, and certainly our teens are going through it too. But the younger kiddos are kind of tough, something to pay attention to. But yeah, they're like a staff member said, they're just so mean. It's like, yep, that was horrible. Yeah, pretty, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say on the flip side of that, this is the first year of outdoor ed programming since COVID that I have actually seen kids being awesome. And we have had more, not that it wasn't happening in isolated incidents before this, but we have had more schools come and say, this is the best group of kids I've ever had.
Lovely.
Or this class is going to, and they have tracked, like the kids have been awesome. They are grateful. They are kind to each other. And so it's really nice to see that in a way, because the last couple of years have been very rough working with kids. So I think there's hope on the horizon. I really 100%. Do.
Yep.
And we do see that breaking up. And there's definitely things that, I know this season, we're going to talk a lot about some of the, best practices when it comes to training our staff and supporting our campers. But then there's these like sort of unexpecteds. And like I said, for me, the younger kiddos aren't the ones that I'm usually worried about, but it's interesting to see a whole conference say these are the ones we're having kind of a tough time with.
Yeah.
And I witnessed that this summer as well.
Just think of what they went through in the last 3 years, and they're only 5. So, they didn't get the socialization that we normally expect them to have.
Gen Alpha is coming for us, y'all. And I'm so excited. Everybody's like, Gen Z. I'm like, you don't even. Gen Z's phenomenal. Gen Alpha is going to like, it's going to be something. It's going to be something.
Yeah. Pretty excited.
Yep.
Amazing. All right. My story, I have to give a big old hat tip to Amanda Wall, who was our opening keynote at the ACA Southeastern Conference this year. The title of her presentation was, "But Where Does the Soup Go?" And she told this story that I have referenced now. I was the closing keynote, and I referenced this multiple times and talking about how we deal with staff and work with staff. And it has really opened my eyes to some things as I've even just been operating in the world. So the long story short version is, she volunteers or works at a camp. Her child is at that camp. Her child is neurodivergent and very literal, very, very literal. And she noticed that her son was going through the buffet line and wasn't getting soup, and it was grilled cheese and soup day. And she was like, he loves soup. This is like his favorite meal. And so she did the back and forth of like, get some soup. And he was like, I don't want any soup. And she was like, no, but like, get some soup. And he said, I don't want soup. And so this push and pull happened. And finally she pulled him aside and said, what is going on? You like soup? And he fessed up to, well, when we clean up, there is a liquid bucket and a solid bucket. And if I don't finish my soup, I don't know which bucket it goes into. And so I don't want to mess that up. So I'm not going to get soup. And so the Amanda was like, okay, we can solve this problem, and goes into the kitchen, asks the question. The kitchen is like, oh, we forgot to put the colander out. So they put the colander over the liquids. You pour your liquids through, it catches the solids go in the bucket. Problem solved. And so Amanda was like, okay, raises her hand, makes an announcement to the camp. Hey, just in case anyone is wondering, this is what you do with your soup if there's any left over at the end of the meal. She said 5 more kids got up to get soup. So it wasn't just her kid. And the number of times I feel like I've perceived folks making choices, opting out of stuff because they don't know some piece of the equation, it has been a lot. I'm actually like quite surprised how many times I've felt this even in the last month. So I love this story. I think it is genius in what it teaches us about how thorough we need to be in explaining activities, expectations, how things are going to go. And especially if you see someone acting a little bit strangely. And the other thing that I want to point out that is often paired with this is the idea of somebody just caring so much, the types of people who really, really care that everyone is taken care of, and that they were really concerned about disappointing folks about not knowing where to put the soup. And so when you can keep an eye out for that, and we certainly have some people that care a lot, maybe more than they need to, about the folks in their community at summer camp, then we need to be able to address that, point it out, talk about the benefits, and talk about some of the traps that we fall into with that as well.
And we also started to see that trend a number of years ago with staff who were afraid to make a mistake. And so they wouldn't try.
Yep.
So, or to ask a question because they might look stupid. You know, they think they might look stupid. So always front loading that, you know, we love to make mistakes. It's the way we grow. We love to do that. And you know what else we love? Questions. We love questions. But again, also having those people who can look out for others and say, hey, you know what? We missed this and we should tell the kids about this. Those are great people to have on staff.
Yeah, and I'm picturing already a game of like, especially with some of the younger ones, that involves, like imaginary food. Like, okay, where does this go? Where does this go? How does this go? And like almost doing a relay race, especially for some of the younger ones, that just to help them out a little bit more in filling in those gaps.
I think the older ones would like it too.
The game. Well, and that's a great
Yeah.
idea for the number of places that I've seen struggle with leftover food and composting and what bucket does it go into. Oh, what a great way to have folks practice that ahead of time and make it fun. Awesome. Well, we're going to take a pause and hear from our sponsor, and then we come back. We've got more stories for you. For our Camp Code listeners, here's an exclusive offer to enhance staff retention year-round. Get Ultra Camp's staff communication calendar with free customizable email templates at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Remember what drew you to the camp experience? Ultra Camp knows it wasn't for the paperwork. That's why they've crafted an all-in-one platform to streamline your program management. Say goodbye to the hassle of learning and managing multiple platforms to run your camp. With Ultra Camp, you can register and manage campers, generate and direct communication, organize schedules and activities, process payments and donations. And Ultra Camp's goal is to help their clients spend less time in the office and more time doing what they love. And as someone who's been hanging out with some of the Ultra Camp people at conferences lately, they're just good people too. Go talk to them because they know a lot, super knowledgeable and caring about the camp industry. If you want to know if Ultra Camp is the right fit for you, they offer free customized demo sessions so you can see their software in action. You can sign up at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. All right, and we are back, continuing to tell stories of unintentional teachable moments. And Beth, I'm curious if you have another one to share with us.
I do.
With no urine balloons.
No more urine balloons. That was a one-time only thing. So my second story is also really about thinking through front-loading expectations, but this time with staff, and especially ones who are new to your camp. So we grew a lot of our staff from the time they were little peewee campers, and we had about a 95% staff return rate year to year. So we worked really hard to make sure that we were making our new people feel welcome and that they had all the things that they needed to be successful. We thought, anyway. We had a program director who was with us for many years, and she was an all-star. She became an all-star, and she had grown up going to camp in a different province, the same camp all the way through her childhood, her CIT summer, and she'd served on that camp staff for several years. And she was now finishing her university degree and had found out about us because her sister had been on staff with us a few years before. So we did all the same front loading and welcoming with her that we did with all of our new staff, but most of whom had been LITs with us and campers with us before, but this was their first summer on staff. And these folks grew up in our culture, and of course, she did not. So we communicated with her via phone calls and emails. I sent her a handwritten welcome letter in the mail, included her staff contract, what she could expect when she arrived, what her job entailed as program director, how excited we were to have her join our camp family, and of course, an explanation of those good old 4S's. And from the moment that we picked her up at the airport, we knew she was going to be a great fit. She was easygoing, super creative, and I mean, one of the most creative staff members we ever had. She was kind and interested in people, thought really well on her feet, and she was always full of joy. And one evening during our 10 days of leadership training, she was in charge of campfire and wanted to add a skit to the campfire. So she did the old sap running through the tree skit, which I first remember seeing in 1974. And if you don't know the skit, it's a very old school summer camp where people come up and become trees. And then you ask somebody to run through them and you say, oh, what time of year is it? It's the time when the sap runs through the trees. And so it was a very different time and a different way of thinking back in the 70s, and a time when we thought making fun of folks in front of the whole camp, if we thought it was a joke, then the person being made fun of would think so too. And as the skit began, my returning staff all began to search me out in the crowd around the campfire because they knew this definitely went against the does it build self-esteem S. And it was very uncomfortable. And our new program director could sense that something wasn't right before the skit finished. But after the campfire, we took her aside and just explained how calling someone a sap, meaning like in colloquial terms, a fool, a sucker, a loser, wasn't something that fit into our 4S culture. And this very easygoing, pretty laid back young woman burst into tears and said, there are so many rules here. And we were taken aback because we thought there are 4 rules here. What this taught us was that, again, we need to spell things out better. We need to give examples of each of those 4 S's. We needed to take a new person's camp experience into account. We couldn't just assume they understood how we operate through a few phone calls and an email or 2 and a card in the mail. And again, it was all about the why. Why have we chosen not to tease people in front of others? Because even though the person being teased might take it all in stride and think it was funny, others might then be wondering for the rest of the week or the rest of the summer when their turn was coming, and they might get really anxious about that, about being made fun of. And it also just didn't, and it still doesn't fit in with our philosophy of creating as safe a space as possible for our people. So just kind of remembering all those little bits and pieces, especially if they're on your leadership team and they have roles in leadership training where they're in charge.
That was a hard one to learn, huh?
It was. And she's still one of my dearest friends, but she's lovely,
Yeah.
lovely, lovely. But it was just there are so many rules. I was like, no, there's not. But very different experience from her growing up at camp.
Yeah. And it sort of breaks your heart because you know that her intentions are so good and
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah.
she's done this and seen this being done many times and everybody laughed and it's and you're really trying to put your best foot forward, especially if you love camp, you know? So it's
and we were very, very gentle about it when we took her
Of
aside to
course.
talk to her, but
You weren't like, hey, sap, get over here.
nope, she was just, and she crumbled, like her body physically crumbled. And I was like, oh my goodness, he felt so badly.
Our job's so hard, guys.
It is not easy. It's not easy. All right, Gabz, do you have another story for us?
I do. Basically it's from 2022 and then we shifted things for 2023. So it ends in a happy story. But basically in 2022, and I'll say this like many times, like compared to 2019, we've never had issues when it comes to paying our staff, them receiving their finances well, et cetera, et cetera. In 2022, we did. And there was a variety of reasons, but it was mostly people not filling out their documents right. Some people putting in their father's names, some people not pressing send, some people not even sending in a document for, for transferring their funds into their bank account, also international staff, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happened in 2022 is as people are talking on our platform at the time was Slack, more and more people realize, oh, me neither. I haven't been paid. Of course, I wasn't part of this group conversation. And then it became like no one was paid, which it wasn't the case. It was 5 people out of like 70. But what it did teach me was not the group conversation that was happening behind the scenes, but more that we put so much front loading in so many areas of camp. We have 2 sessions during staff training when it comes to payment, and then that's it. But we're in more than day-to-day contact with our staff. So some of the things that we shifted for this year, we do have an agenda book. So in the agenda book, there is a date that says you're getting paid that day. At our staff meeting, we say, hey, tomorrow's payday, so that people, if they're on their days off, they know on the day that's payday, we let people know. And we also, on the first payment, we made sure, everybody had to say, I got paid. There were some people that also did get paid and said they didn't get paid. They just didn't know where to look where the money was, basically. So it was also like some people that it was like their first learning. But I did realize within my organizations, and if your organization is doing this well, then kudos to you. But I focus a lot of time on camper care and like on-site care, but I'm not always thinking beyond that. And so just informing our staff, and of course they knew that they could always come to us, but it's also a different time. And in the past, people would just come forward and say like, hey, my payment didn't go through. They didn't in 2022. It was really like behind the scenes. So just by putting these tools in, allowed people to be like, oh, they really want to talk about this. So I just tried to make it really obvious that we do want to talk about it, and brought it up, and just made it part of our bi-weekly conversations.
It's so smart. And I think so often at camp, we ignore the fact that we're getting paid. So I love that you put that into your culture, because if there's a problem, that's a really quick way to make people unhappy, is if
very quick way.
And you don't want to. And I think that with the sort of distance right now, our like trust is really being rebuilt, but so people are coming forward with so many more things. But if you think that maybe this is their first job, they don't know how to do that. Also, trust still with authority figures is difficult. And there is, I find, still sometimes an assumption of, well, they messed up, which is possible, like maybe. But one of my leadership team members said to one of our staff members, camp wants to pay you. We have put this money aside for you. Like, it is in the bank for you. And one of our staff members was like, oh, I never thought of it that way. We're like, yeah, we want to give this to you. Please take the money. So I think so just making it part of our every other week, we're saying, oh, on Wednesday, tomorrow's payday, remember, check, at this time. And then we did a check-in, and every single person we checked to make sure, like, verbally looked at them in the eyes. Did you get paid? How do you know? That kind of thing. And then, and made it like it's not a big deal. Just want to make sure that we're talking about money, and it's all good.
It's all good. It's all good. It makes me think, I actually tied a very direct correlation from where does the soup go to staff paperwork in my closing keynote, which is, does anybody have problems with your staff not filling out their pre-hire paperwork? None of y'all have that problem. No, everybody has that problem. People just not filling out their forms. And maybe it's where does the soup go? They're like, I don't know how to fill this out. And so at least in the US, like, we as employers can't tell them this is what you need to put here. But the way I would get around that is I'd say, most people fill this out this way. You may want to consult with a family member, or if you have questions about it, here is how you can reach me about it, or putting in a way that they could be in contact very easily, versus looking at the form and going, I don't know my social security number. I'm not going to fill this out.
We used to do a business meeting at every staff orientation weekend in May. So 6 weeks before leadership training started. And we would always make it really fun. One year, Travis shaved his head, put on a leather trench coat and glasses, and he was Neo, and I came in as Trinity. And amazing. We did a whole thing and put the paperwork out, and we all filled it in together at the same time. But it was always this business meeting. So there were different staff used to look forward to it, because we would dress up in different ridiculous costumes. but we could sort of tell them what to put in there. But I mean, not specifically, but this is where you fill in this, put that in there, so that we had all their paperwork signed before they left at the end of May weekend.
I mean, it's a podcast. Basically, how do we eliminate hurdles for staff? You know, like honestly, when it gets to those things, I have a lot. I hate hurdles. Hurdles are lame.
They trip you up, and it's not pretty when you fall.
They do trip you, and it's not great. And it's like, ugh, I don't have time. Hurdles, get rid of them. So yeah, I love it.
Well,
tell your staff when they're getting paid.
I love that. That's actually a great segue into my final story, which is, it is not this happened at camp, but it was when I was getting ready for a training. So I've run my company now for 5 years. I have run it out of my house all along. I have loaded equipment in and out of my car multiple times. And every time I do it, I park next to this little porch that is to my door to my house. And so I pull stuff out of my car, and then I have to lift it up onto the porch. It's just like one little step. And then there's one more step into the house. And there's also a post that I have to navigate around. So just picture multiple times in my life, I've had, mannequin bags on either side, and they stick way out. And I'm like trying to slide between this way or set the really big, heavy thing down only to have to lift it again. And recently I loaded up for a class, and I was like, oh, I could just put my car and orient it so the back of it's right at the porch, so I can load right onto the porch and from the porch, and I don't have to navigate around like I go out the door and into the car. Why has it taken me 5 years? So my encouragement for you, and kind of the moral of the story from all of our stories, is if you're having these little pain points or moments of stress where you're like, this is harder than maybe it needs to be, then pause and think about, like, is there a way I can make this easier? Like, do we have to be stressed about this? Does this have to be so hard? And a lot of times there is a solution there. And if there's not, that's a great time to pose it to staff. Does anybody have a creative solution for this? Like, I'm kind of stumped by it, because that's frustrating for staff too. And they're like, it doesn't have to be this hard. It doesn't have to be this complicated. It doesn't have to be this sweaty, whatever it might be, fill in the blank. But I think there's a lot of
stuff
things
is hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's plenty of stuff that we ask our staff to do at camp that we make it harder than it has to be. So take that and use that in life. I would say.
Back your car up to the porch, everybody.
Just back your car up to the porch. Even sorry you normally park. It'll work for today.
I love it.
All right. Gabrielle, I believe it is the one and only time for the recap.
Recap. All right. Besides great stories, we also have some great tips and tricks. Let's start with Beth. The pee-pee balloons could happen if you do not tell the adults that are coming to be adulting at your camp. That's right. Adults also sometimes don't use their great brains, and they sometimes say, hey, nostalgia is more important. Pee-pee balloons. So make sure we're front loading with them. Also, staff, we need to sometimes spell things out for them, provide examples. At Best Camp, she was thinking we only have 4 rules, but actually, to some people, it's a little bit more complex. I love the idea of giving some good concrete examples. Where does the soup go? Is something that we might have all experienced in our life at one point, and then we bury deep down inside and forget about it. But people that are new to your camp, they're experiencing it in real life. So how do we make sure those basic little things aren't being missed, so that campers and staff members are getting the best out of their camp experience and feel like they can take up space? With myself, guess what? You try too hard is something you might hear from a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, maybe even a 15-year-old. Kids can be harsh. How can we support our staff members a little bit better with, some of the campers that are practicing, flexing their muscles? How do we make sure we're adapting to the needs of our staff members, noticing that they might be struggling with some of these behavioral issues as well? Make payment, I was going to say cool. I mean, it could be cool, but make it easy, make it non-taboo. Host a business meeting, dress up while you do it, and make sure that you can, if you're not allowed to tell people how to fill stuff out, you can say, most people fill out ... Thanks, Ruby, for that one. And that is the recap for today.
Genius. As always, thanks so much, Gabz. And we want to invite all of you all to get involved. You can tell us your thoughts on this episode by using the hashtag camp code or hashtag urine balloons, whatever, it's fine.
Let's not make that popular.
You can also tell us what topics you'd like for us to discuss, any guests you'd recommend that we have on the show, any great leadership training tips that you have to share. We'd love to hear from you because we are all about sharing in this industry. And if you have found this podcast to be useful, please leave us a rating and review in your podcasting app. It helps other folks find the show and really helps keep the show going. And next up, we want to make sure you know how to get in touch if you have questions that have stemmed from this episode. So Beth, where can folks find you?
Our website is gocamp.pro. My email is beth@gocamp.pro, and I'm on Instagram at topaz_fae, F-A-E.
And Gabrielle.
You can check out where I work at ouareau.com, ouareau.com, or you can get in touch with me at info@ouareau.com.
Nice. And you can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com, or follow me on Instagram at rubyoutdoors. Our next podcast, we will be sharing some new insights. Stay tuned for the topic on that. Keep an eye out. And our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And we would love to hear some of your most memorable moments or most effective tips. You can tell us what they are using that hashtag camp code. And today's best practice comes from Gabz.
So this also goes out to one of my staff members in 2022 who came to camp very eager. Day 2 of staff training, got a call from her partner. Partner has COVID. She goes into isolation. She has COVID. 10 days later comes back. Campers have already arrived. So she missed training. She basically just missed training. So we had like an onboarding person that we already anticipated to be on camp, et cetera, blah, 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 all that stuff. But she still felt very, very lost. So neurodivergent asked me, do we have any like old t-shirts, camp t-shirts? She needs some big bag of t-shirts. I was like, yeah, I'm sure we could find some. Next day, she comes to our staff meeting with one of the t-shirts on. And she has the schedule written up, but upside down. So when she looks down, she can see the entire schedule of the day. Now we have our camper pocket camp counselors that they do carry around that do have the schedule, but she was like, I need it like a Big Mac. I need to bite into it to know what I'm doing step by step. And I was like, this is brilliant. And so I think we can normalize at camp because camp is one of the best places to be wacky, to do things that maybe some people might turn their noses up outside of camp, but that's why camp is amazing. And to create that space where staff members can, if this is the best way to learn. And I think role modeling, wearing a t-shirt, an oversized t-shirt with some information on it that you can see is pretty darn awesome. And it's pretty cool. And I think, using some old camp t-shirts or even just going to your local thrift shop and getting a bag of old shirts and turning them inside out and allowing staff members to write on it, what do they need to remember for today, I think is cool and sends a very great message.
Thanks, Gabrielle. That was awesome. And Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. And this year, we're adding a new one called The Pudding because the proof is in the pudding. Join Travis Allison and Dr. Mandy Baker as they share scientific proof to improve our staff recruitment and retention. You'll find The Pudding in the Camp Hacker podcast feed. From all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.